Well, we're very excited to welcome you to the first episode in our Scaling from the Edge series. And today we're focusing on what not to cut. Here at ScaleSpace, we're a community of scale-up businesses, and our goal is to help them to be more successful more quickly. Bringing together leading universities and leading business builders, we're here to help unlock the potential of UK innovation. Now, the first ScaleSpace, built in conjunction with Imperial College London, is due to open in July on Imperial College's White City campus. And if it were not for COVID-19, we'd have been hosting this event there. Fortunately, because of this technology, we can still continue to explore key topics from our community. So our new Scaling from the Edge series explores critical issues facing the UK scale-up sector as a result of COVID-19. And today, after the last few months where businesses have been focusing naturally on survival, on what cuts to make, managing cash, getting help from government schemes and other sources, we're going to look at this from a different angle. What not to cut. So with the country moving out of lockdown and steps being put in place for retail and businesses to reopen, today we explore how organisations should be thinking about how to win and how to take advantage of opportunities. With the help of our expert panel, we're going to explore that topic in more detail today. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Julia Tierney, Chief Executive and founding member of Hive Learning. Next, we have Dave Kirby, partner at private equity firm Livingbridge. And finally, joining us from Imperial College, Nelson Phillips, a Professor of Innovation and Strategy. So I guess just coming back to you, Nelson, maybe from your experience or from the academic viewpoint, as businesses are thinking about how to win as the country emerges from lockdown and hopefully the economy restarts, what is your view on how organisations identify their competitive advantages and how they should think about setting strategy in what is a period of massive uncertainty?
I think it's always a challenge for companies as they develop to really understand what they're good at. I think that's can often be difficult to both identify, but also particularly to understand the component parts of that. Because what we're seeing is lots of companies now who are trying to figure out what do they do that they can apply in a different way to something different. There's a project going on and a number of people talking about this idea of temporary pivots, experimenting, doing new things, trying to do stuff with stuff you're really good at. So for some companies, this is a huge advantage. What they already do is actually more useful in this new environment. If you make PPE, for example, this is a great opportunity. You have no problem other than perhaps ramping up your production quickly enough given the constraints. But if you're a restaurant, there's a real challenge, and you have to, if you're in hospitality, what do you do? What aspects of your business can you leverage? And trying to really think about what are the different component parts of your resources and capabilities that underpin your competitive advantage, and how can you reuse those in some new way? How can you focus on the parts that still work?
David, from your experience, the businesses you're involved in, obviously you're looking at helping them to win, but in the same vein, any thoughts on how they can identify key capabilities to be able to take advantage of an opportunity?
You have the same assets and you largely have the same capabilities, but the requirement of the sort of customers and sometimes, in some businesses, suppliers and other stakeholders and regulators changes very quickly, very dramatically. And one of the things about being in a growing small, medium-sized companies, you can, and often you should be very internally focused, because once you identify the market opportunity, then it's just about executing against it. And one of the big things that we've Livingbridge and all of our managers have had to do is suddenly get a lot more externalized very quickly with clients, with what's happening with competitors, with advisors, anyone else that can bring that external perspective, because then that lets you have the most informed conversation you can have around what problem are we now going to solve, given that sort of the need set of our target audience has changed. So as an example, one of our investee companies provides consulting services into healthcare, helping to improve the efficiency of operating theatres. That business redeployed almost entirely all of its workforce into COVID-19 contingency planning. That happened very quickly. But now what's happening is there's another change in the requirements of the user base and having to think about actually what happens next. Also, helping to get an understanding of how that might vary for parts of your customer base. So traditional ways of segmenting your customer base, for instance, may become less relevant. So whereas you might have segmented by geography or by size, actually segmenting by vertical and thinking about which verticals are going to be the most resilient or recover the fastest, and which verticals do you not currently have great exposure to, has also been an important part of that discussion around external perspectives.
Right, that's a great insight. And Julia, I mean, Hive Learning started out as a platform primarily looking at sports coaching, but has changed direction a couple of times. So as you've been dealing with COVID-19, what have you learned for your business about what you need to focus on or invest in order to maximise the opportunity for the business?
Yeah, actually, just prior to COVID-19, we'd already made looking at the performance of the business and the markets and the sort of problems we were solving. We had already taken quite a significant shift to really focus on the corporate market. Actually really timely, because as you imagine, the sports market is a challenging one in terms of funding right now, although actually we helped solve a good problem in terms of connectivity there. I think it was the right thing to do to I think we've been taken back to startup mode in that we've got a lot of opportunities come out the works, because we've got a great platform really that's a good solution for right now. It's a platform for people at home doing learning that's engaging, that feels social. You don't feel like you're on your own. You're feeling like you're contributing to the overall culture of the organisation, which most organisations is, shifting quite quickly right now. And then really recognising that a lot of our best work is when we work really closely with our customers to solve their problems. And as soon as we do that well, very true to customer success. If you prove value of the customer, that's the way you grow them. It's not about great account management. It's about getting results on the ground. So, the temptation early on was to look at our company. A big part of our cost base is the team sort of that are involved in the ground. When we're a tech-based company, it sort of seems a bit weird that we still invest so heavily in that space, but it definitely pays for itself sort of 10 times over, because that is where we're able to grow those accounts quickest in these conditions. Hypotheses we're collecting up in terms of other ways we can pivot to, we're able to take those and have those conversations 5 or 10 times over in a couple of days by having close relationships with a broad customer base and having that kind of network of people working with them. And similarly, we've been able to have really creative conversations. So on the odd case where we are up against a customer who are, a major retailer having to make massive cuts and struggling to find the funding, we've been able to be really honest about that and be much more creative with our commercials and make sure that we can create a support system, again, which just wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't kind of protected our customer success and partnerships way of working. So for us, that's been really important.
Okay, that's fascinating. I think, there's a sort of theme here of understand the customer, understand the opportunity, experiment. Nelson, your sort of notion of a temporary pivot, all of which doesn't quite sound like the strategy textbooks that I studied when I did my MBA. So Nelson, how should we think about strategy in a world where maybe things are very different?
I think Julia's points about her company really highlight what's happening to lots of companies is it's pushing them back into really entrepreneurship mode. So for a lot of even quite large companies, parts of their business don't work. So it's an opportunity to experiment, or you're forced to experiment, whichever. And really it's a lot of things that you had, as Dave said, a lot of things that you had sort of decided. You knew how they worked and they were set, and your business model was oriented towards that world. Now suddenly they're not working anymore. And so you're pushed back into this mode of experimentation, of trying things, seeing what happened. It's an opportunity for companies to actually check some of the assumptions they made. So you're back to this kind of experimenting, trying, failing. And if you don't have a lot of resources, that can chew through a lot of resources quite quickly. So you're moving from the kind of strategy you studied in your MBA, which was really strategy around kind of well-defined industry, well-defined competitors. You're right back at this entrepreneurship stage where you're trying to understand what's the problem, who's my customer, who's my competitor, what's my business model. And it's quite challenging. Opportunity for lots of innovation, but also you can only experiment for so long, and you're going to have to find something that works.
To pick up on Nelson's point, I think I think about this as not wasting the opportunity of a crisis to learn something about how your business performs at the extremes. So a couple of examples. So actually, how productive was your business beforehand based on how productive it's being now? So actually, because businesses have made changes to furlough parts of their workforce, because the demands of clients have changed, because ways of working had to change, a lot of businesses in our portfolio are being more productive, and also being more innovative at the same time. There's also challenging fundamental assumptions, to Julia's point, about how customers interpret value in your product. So which parts do they really care about, and which parts they care less about? And also on the list of things they would never cut, where does your product or service sit? And that can be true equally from a consumer perspective as well as a B2B perspective. And normally you actually have to go to quite extremes in terms of primary research and expensive projects to understand that. And there's this, this data is there for you right now if you look at it, and it won't be there too long, because for long, as Nelson said, as things start getting back to normal, we have less time and we have less sight of these sort of peripheral data points in our business, but not wasting the opportunity a crisis presents to ask these kind of questions is really important, I think.
And Nelson, this sort of almost reinventing your business, reinventing your commercials, reinventing your proposition at the same time as coping with what has been a significant impact on the sort of normal business. How do you think about how management and leaders should deal with that challenge?
Part of it's looking at what the assumptions you've been making about how the world worked for your business, and really questioning those underlying assumptions. What is it I've assumed about my customers? What is it I've assumed about how this business should run? Where are areas that I can flex that I thought I couldn't flex? And so it's really about working together as a team, as an entrepreneurship sort of entrepreneurial team, to think through, okay, what are we doing? What assumptions underpin this? What's different now? And what are the other things that we can really, really challenge that can let us do something new, to try something new, to get out of this, to learn something about our environment, our customers, our suppliers, that allows us to do something better and improve the business model and improve our chances of survival and perhaps thriving afterwards.
And we heard earlier, Julia, you suggesting that definitely not cutting the resources that you're directing towards your customers was looking like a smart decision. Based on this conversation, sounds like there's pretty strong consensus around getting close to the customer and innovating, and that could be product or commercial or sales innovation. How have you kept the team motivated to innovate and to come up with new ideas at this time?
Yeah, so we try and be really open about every conversation. So, we're using Slack like crazy, as you can imagine everyone is, and we've set up a heap of new channels, and basically all our client conversations are now shared across everyone. So everyone's able to see that insight, pick up on any threads of that conversation, channel that into their own conversations and feed back into the centre. So that's a really key point. I think previously that was probably happening on, because a lot of our board aren't on Slack, it tended to be on a few people on email, quite old fashioned still, and actually the full company weren't seeing that. We've also been a lot more transparent about, what a good company looks like and for an investor, and where we're trying to get to, and what metrics, some of the company didn't know anything about lifetime value or cost of acquisition really in detail before. And again, that's really helped, other people in other parts of the process come with ideas around, well, actually, when you do that workshop, you always tend to do that after the sale, but it's always at that point that our customers buy more or understand our product better. So why don't we move that to, before the sale? It's slightly more expensive, but it seems like we could convert more. So there's been some great ideas come through all parts of the company down to kind of opening up communication and having more visibility across it. There's always been the fear that is sort of a bit too much for people and overload, so there's been a hard way to manage that. And then on the flip side, it does get back to sort of headless chickens mode. So you see a few account managers drop some revenue or get worried about a customer that's not going to be able to pay now, but we still think might pay in future. And they get thinking really creative about bringing in other projects, which actually, if we're really honest, we're not passionate about solving. So we're really anchored in customer success. We're still very passionate that we won't take on a project unless we really believe we can drive value and it works. We had a customer that basically really just didn't believe that we could make the change in their organization, but they didn't care. All they knew is they were a buyer. They had to tick a box. I want to buy this product, and I want to, they're going to bring it on. But for us, a customer like that actually cost us quite a lot to deliver, because we care so deeply about getting it right that actually generally we don't tend to make a lot of margin until we kind of grow a customer beyond. So lifetime value is really great, but actually your kind of land and expand model does work for us, but only after a certain point. So that particular instance, the salesperson brought it back to the team and we all had a discussion about it, and we all said, we just don't believe we can make this piece of work to work for us. We don't think it's got any growth potential. They're telling us it doesn't have any growth potential, and they're also telling us they don't believe they're going to create any behavior change. So for us, even though it was a cash right now, actually the on cost of that for the next 3 to 6 months for me would be substantially more than the cost right now.
I get just changing topic a little bit. So Dave, if you think about the businesses you're involved in and boards you may sit on, what are you seeing as the role of the board or the external advisors in right now? Because I think we sense it's different to how it was in a more stable environment. So how are you finding that?
The point I raised earlier around needing external context, that probably has come more from board advisors, just because they tend to be more connected. As investors, we're really connected into the sectors of the economy into which we invest, and we have, I have many conversations each day with different businesses, and I'm always picking up nuggets about what's working, what's not working. I guess one of the things we did early on in this crisis and continue to do is giving management teams and boards permission to think the unthinkable. Actually, at the start, that was imagine you have no revenue and work back from that. And now it's what are going to be the permanent dislocations in your market or your customer base that you need to be aware of. How would you think about actually saying no to certain types of business, or where we've sort of said something in the past was off the agenda, like for instance, M&A. Is that now legitimate to bring that back onto the agenda because things have changed, pricing of businesses has changed, or the opportunities in front of us has changed? So it does give you the permission to revisit and cover old ground. And sometimes, the role of the board is to create the space for that to happen.
And Nelson, from the work you've done and sort of the academic perspective, organizational dynamics in a time like this, any advice for leaders?
Well, I think this is a really interesting opportunity for people to do these kind of, it's almost scenario planning, more or less formally, saying exactly what the kind of thing Dave said, which is, what if you didn't have any revenue? Or what if that part of your business disappeared? What would happen then? I mean, some of the organizations I've been working with, they've been, for the first time, trying to do that kind of scenario, like, what will we do if 50% of our customers don't come back? What would that look like? How, we're not going to say that's going to happen, but what would we do? Just how do we think about ourselves if that happens? What would we do with these buildings that we have, or these restaurants that we have, or whatever? And so a bit of some scenario planning. The other thing that's interesting is I think everyone's more willing to be open, so including customers. So you can have conversations with your customers that you couldn't have before. Also with the members of your organization, you can say things that before would have caused panic. But now people are okay, well, let's talk about that. What would we do? Or how will we deal with that? How would this work? Or with customers, what if we can never do that thing we used to do before? What if we have to? How would you feel about that? You can ask that question, and they're not going to be shocked right now. I think internally, the only problem we have is that not only problem, but a significant problem is people are starting to experience a little bit of pandemic fatigue. So people are like, they've been trying to be very flexible. They've been trying to work from home. They've been trying to do all these things. And I think at least in the organizations I work with, people they're just running out of enthusiasm a bit to deal with these problems. So I think as leaders, the challenge is to figure out also what you're not going to do, to give people a little bit of space. So pay attention to what can we not do right now that can free up a little bit of resources, that can give people a little bit of space.
There's a role here for leaders and for boards to play of maintaining that enthusiasm and momentum, and staying true to the cause even in times of adversity. And I think you're right. I think certainly speaking personally, I'm absolutely ready to get back to work and to get out of my house. But perhaps Dave, your thoughts perhaps on how you motivate teams who might be getting a little bit tired of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, there's a again, it does vary based on whether operationally this means you're really busy or not very busy. So actually, in the businesses where they're operationally busier than usual, you're just giving space. Actually, that particular budget milestone we were aiming for with this board meeting, don't stress about it. If we just have a conversation this month, that's fine. And encouraging, make hay while the sun is shining being the dominant message, rather than worrying too much about the future. Your horizon in those businesses naturally shortens. In the businesses where they just operationally have more time, I think trying to use that time for effective thinking and planning, but also not trying to rush into it. I think we all want to feel busy, and actually in many of our investee companies, lives' work have been destroyed, and people are questioning those fundamental things. What does this situation mean for me? And just being a good listener, knowing when the conversation is right to have or not. I mean, remote communication is great, but you miss all of that non-verbal communication that's so important to big conversations at work and at home as well. So I think knowing when the right time to push on to the next topic is in the sort of narrative of a board, but also being able to bring it back to something if necessary. And it's all down to the personalities involved as well. A lot of businesses, they value the ability to think about what happens next, but the reality is they've been knocked down, some cases to nothing by this crisis, and our job is to help pick them back up again. That just requires you to take a different approach each time.
And Julia, your experience on that?
So to Dave's point, we're one of the operationally busy organisations. So we're either growing customers or doing more to support them if we've got the spare capacity to do so, because that's how we work to drive success. So I think for us the thing is really burnout. So being really compassionate about where people have got family situations, trying to be really open and honest about, flexible working with kids at home, having a baby thrust upon you in the middle of a management meeting and it being okay. And and I think so sort of leading from that, being really authentic, really honest. And I think that's been the biggest motivator, knowing that everyone's busier than ever.
But maybe each of you could give one piece of advice to our community on what they should not cut, or maybe what they should focus on. Nelson, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I think what we've heard from all of us repeatedly is that I think that this is a time for experimentation and innovation, particularly if you're in one of the companies whose business really doesn't function in the current context. But at the same time, as Julia said, you need to stay true to what you are and what you want, what you really believe in terms of your business. That's very important for everyone. And leaders at this time have to balance off this experimentation and innovation. You don't do anything just because what you used to do doesn't work. You need to find something that fits with your vision, your culture, who you are as an organization.
Okay. And Dave?
I think it's take the learnings that you've had from this rare opportunity to get data from the edges of your business and think about how you can bring those back to the core. So an example, one of the companies I'm on the board of turned off its phone lines to customers at the start of this crisis because operationally couldn't handle the volumes, and the net promoter score's gone up. Now, I don't quite know what that means for the future, but we would never have got that data point, but it will definitely prove valuable in the future because it just gets you the opportunity to challenge so many established truths in an organization. So don't waste the learnings that you've taken out of this crisis. They're I think the most valuable thing is the point around experimentation and innovation again.
And Julia?
I'd say over communicate and continue to do so, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone to your customers. So the amount of times we've had account managers hide behind emails and worry that something's happening or something luring in the background, it's just been amazing when you actually pick up the phone to people, ask how it is, how can we help. It doesn't even have to be a sales conversation. Just, we heard this last week. Does that apply to you? And just the insight that we've got from that has been sort of a huge open door. And I just think it'd be a shame to go back now. So, and continue to communicate both ways. They really appreciate it back too.
I think that's been a fantastic conversation. I came into this thinking we were going to have a bit of a theoretical conversation about understanding our competitive advantages and the things that drove our businesses. But actually, I think this is really energizing, because what we're talking about is there's opportunities out there, and understand your customer, understand your market, do experimentation, stay close to your customer. We've talked a few times about how you could learn things that will improve your business, not just for today, but for the long term. I think, Julia, your points on communication and engaging the organisation, even for small firms, is critical. Otherwise, they're going to lose the motivation and not stay the course. And we've also talked a few times about an external focus being critical right now, when we know for lots of scaling businesses, it's very easy to become very insular and inward-looking, focusing on cash flow rather than focusing on growth opportunities. So I think that, to me, has been a fantastic conversation. So I'd like to thank Nelson Phillips from Imperial College London, Dave Kirby from Livingbridge, Julia Tierney from Hive Learning. We are going to be doing another one of these, which is actually focusing on company culture in a world where there is more remote working. So I think some of the themes we've picked on today will come out in the next episode in the series. And for anybody who's interested in what we're doing at Scalespace, have a look on our website, scalespace.co.uk. But otherwise, big thanks to the panel today for all of your fantastic contributions. And thanks to everybody for watching or listening.